Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ariel May Imamoto, for those of you that I've never been able to meet or haven't met yet. I was I believe, 2015 intern at the Tuna Canyon Detention Station Coalition, and I am the MC for today, so welcome, and I'm very excited to be here and very honored to be up here. Thank you, Nancy. Before we begin today, I just wanted to give a special thank you to the San Fernando Valley Japanese American Community Center for their constant support of the Tuna Canyon Detention Station Coalition and for letting us use this space today. So let's get started. So I'd like to bring up Kyoko Nancy Oda, who is the president of the Tuna Canyon Detention Station Coalition, a leader in the community, and someone who's been very influential in my life. So, Nancy.
It's always good to start off with a young person, gives you hope for the future. Welcome everyone to the Only the Oaks Remain exhibit today. I am very touched by the presence of so many descendants who are the Nisei sons and daughters and grandchildren and relatives of those who were detained at Tuna Canyon so many years ago. So in memory of their Issei parents, we are here today. Tuna Canyon is located about 15 minutes away, really close, off the 210 freeway. And since 2015, the Only the Oaks Remain exhibit has been sponsored by the San Fernando Valley Japanese Community Center and the National Parks. Today's retractable version has been generously funded by the RISA Foundation grant. I'd like to take this moment to introduce our project director who's here today. His name is Dr. Kanji Sahara. Please stand, Kanji. I don't know if Kanji's sensitive, but he's 88 years old and he runs me ragged. When we started the coalition, the mission statement was to preserve the stories of the Japanese, German, Italian aliens, and Japanese taken from Peru and others during World War II. But since that time, we have evolved and things have changed. And our vision is to illuminate the United States government's World War II incarceration of the Japanese, German, and Italian immigrants and others at Tuna Canyon Detention Station, so that such injustice is never again experienced by anyone, anywhere. So the Tuna Canyon story is not found in history books. So to the students in the audience, I welcome and encourage your questions. And as you can see on slide 1, it says Presidential Proclamation 2525, specifically 2526 and 2527. So the President of the United States, right after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, December 7th, you see the date on the screen. I'm trying to keep it simple so that if you're taking notes, you can pick up on this very quickly, that they are authorized the arrest or to cause the arrest of these individuals. So this is actually a photo from one of our descendants, and it shows that the FBI came and searched for weapons or shortwave radios, cameras, and guns. And by nightfall of December 7th, leaders of the Japanese community found themselves in local jails in San Diego, Los Angeles, Terminal Island, and Santa Barbara, and then transferred to Tuna Canyon or Griffith Park. The majority of the prisoners were men. So these are some of the things that they were looking for, and I don't want to go over the list, but it's quite comprehensive, and a lot of these things were necessary to do the jobs that they had at the time, which was either farming or fishermen or things of that nature. So I'm going to move forward. So who was at Tuna Canyon? There was a list called simply the ABC list or the custodial index list, which identified aliens that could be dangerous, such as Buddhists or Shinto priests and people of that caliber who were leaders of the community because they felt like if they cut off the head of the serpent, that we would be leaderless. So if you look at the list, it's A, then B, which is martial arts teachers, Japanese language school teachers, and then C, the people that they felt were less dangerous. So part of the exhibit shows Daisho Tana, who was a Buddhist priest, and fishermen like Heigoro Endo, whose son is one of our chief researchers. Many of you who have been working with us in the past know about Russell Endo. But the story is much deeper than the men and the ABC list. They have left behind women, wives, families that were confused and frightened. So we set up in the back several monitors with interviews. These are part of the Legacy project. And the first slide is in memory of Kataro Ishimoto. His daughter Yohazama is here today. She said the day the FBI came, his boots were in the barn, so the children knew that Dad was taken away. The separation of families during that era caused a crisis much like today's immigrant children. Sigrid Toya, who's interviews in the back, talks about her father, Eugene, and mother, Amy. She said, the years during in which my father was absent were difficult ones for my mother and me. Her father was picked up on December 7th. So without money, life was not easy, and food was scarce. It is almost impossible for my mother to find a job, as no one was interested in hiring a German, viewed at the time as a potential saboteur. After Tuna Canyon, Sigrid's father was interned in Kennedy, Texas. So this is what Tuna Canyon looked like. I can't really see from my viewpoint, but the point is that Haru Inaba Kuromiya, who is present here today, I hope she doesn't mind me saying she's a young 95, has been waiting for the Historic Cultural Monument memorial for many, many years. This picture shows then, when it was a camp, and now, which is the Verdugo Hills Golf Course. We were able to identify the exact location of the camp based on the mountain slope. That doesn't change. Her father was a chicken farmer, while Haru was a student at Riverside Polytechnic High School that fateful February 1942. The family wanted to stay together since her father and uncle were already taken by the FBI. Then later, they went to Manzanar concentration camp and finally to Crystal City, Texas. The United States government moved the detainees often to make their lives miserable. Women had to fend for themselves for several months, which was extremely difficult those days because the men were the breadwinners. The legacy interviews that you might be further interested are located on our website. The next story is about the intersection between deeper tragedy and grit. In May of 2004, a group of 8 Torrance High School students were selected to participate in a research project about an alumnus named Ted Tanoue and how he had fought in World War II while his family was incarcerated in Camp Jerome and Rower in Arkansas. Their findings revealed that he still had given it all, his all on the battlefield, and how he eventually was awarded posthumously the Congressional Medal of Honor. They researched Ted Tanoue's history via school yearbooks, newspapers, the internet, and interviews with veterans of World War II. And the story goes like this. President Roosevelt signs EO 9066 that paved the way for the forced removal of 125,000 Japanese and Japanese Americans from the West Coast as a military necessity on February 19th. On February the 20th, the son, Ted, is inducted into the United States Army. On February 21, the father is suspected of being a spy and arrested in the middle of the night by the FBI. A wife and 4 other sons and a daughter are sent to Jerome. Then sadly, the mother and father receive word that their son has died in Italy on September 6, 1944. Thus, Ted restored honor to his family, his self, and his unit upon receiving the Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest honor. The film that you saw in the earlier slide, Citizen Tanoe, became nationally broadcast documentary film that is an inspiration to us all. We are honored that Robert Horstein, who is an Emmy awarded producer and documentary filmmaker, is here with us today. Please give him a hand, he's filming. So this next slide was created by Kanji Sahara many years ago, and this was very helpful to me as a child of the camps. It starts with the detention stations like Tuna Canyon that were for the Japanese, German, and Italian men that was authorized by the Department of Justice or the INS, the Immigration Service. So that's part of the list to the first column. The second column is the assembly centers, such as the fairgrounds, racetracks, like Santa Anita. Okay. Then the next item is further down. They are the names of the 10 concentration camps, like Manzanar, Post, and Gila River. Then, as you continue, the other isolation camps are listed, and in Hawaii, at that time, that was under martial law, as opposed to being a Department of Justice camp or a WRA or War Relocation Authority camp. And you also will notice, if you keep going, it says Canada, Australia, and Cuba were also involved in prisoner exchange. So recently there was a ceremony at JANA where 75 samples of soil from the various incarceration sites were gathered and consecrated. And so this is what the list looks like in totality. Thank you, Kanji, for all the work you did in doing that. So Tuna Canyon is history in our own backyard, just 15 minutes away. What do we do to prevent this from ever happening again? Martin Luther King said, "In the end, we will not remember the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends." Although I am not a descendant of Tuna Canyon, I strongly believe that it is time for us to speak up for others. So I'd like to acknowledge the San Fernando Valley Japanese Community Center for their sponsorship for many, many years, the Reza Grant Foundation, the National Parks, and the Manzanar Committee, which is present today in helping us put this event on. So I'm going to leave you with the next slide. And this is our mission statement that I said at the beginning, that our energy is not only about the past, but it's about what are we going to do about the future. I'll be happy to introduce Claudia Culling. She's been a charter member of the Tuna Canyon Detention Station Coalition and keeps me out of trouble. She's a lawyer, and I can't tell you how many projects that she has helped us with. So it's a pleasure to introduce you, Claudia. Please step up.
I'm just going to give you a little bit of an update on our situation here. I'm going to take the microphone over to this map. In 2006, Lloyd Hitt and Paul Tanishi began studying the site's history. Others of us also became interested in preserving this history as well. Since that time, with all our efforts and support, the City of LA granted Historic Cultural Designation 1039 to a 1-acre part of the site. Right here. It's marked as the Oak Grove on the map. It's outlined by the green dashes, is owned by a corporation called Snowball. Snowball wants to be able to develop a site with 215 houses. Without a zone change, Snowball could only build 19 houses. So Snowball applied for a zone change, but the city council denied the request. So Snowball sued the city. The trial court upheld the city's action, so Snowball then appealed to the court. And we're waiting for the Court of Appeal to rule on that. And we expect, or at least we hope, that that ruling will come soon. As I'm sure most of you know, the coalition intends to develop and erect a memorial on this site. Because of the historic cultural designation on only a part of the site, no houses can be built here. Depending on that Court of Appeal decision, we might be allowed to only use this 1 acre for a memorial, or we may be able to, and by we I mean a public entity such as the State Mountains Recreation and Conservation Authority, be able to purchase a larger area and build a park along with the memorial. And so we're currently investigating options for funding and design of this memorial. But that's the situation currently. Thank you.
I did hear a lot of stories about my grandfather, and I didn't know whether to believe them or not, you know. My mother said, okay, they're samurai family. He went to medical school, went to law school, and I thought, how can that be? How can someone go to medical school and law school and then come to the United States, you know? Doesn't really make a lot of sense. But I did find out when I went to Japan the records, and he did go to medical school in Kyoto and law school in Tokyo, and apparently never finished. So the stories about my grandfather are he was not really a very good student. He was kind of a playboy. One story was that he felt very badly about selling his sister's kimonos for money so that he could pay for his playthings or playtime or whatever, his fun things. So my grandfather, in the eyes of my mother and her sister, they didn't think that he worked very hard. In fact, they said he really never worked on the farm. He rode the horse and kind of supervised other people working. But their mother, Toshi, was a hard worker. So she cooked for the workers, the family, and also had a little stand where she sold vegetables, you know, from the farm. But my grandfather was apparently reading in his library, you know, and not really working physically. I did hear one story from another Japanese relative. I said, well, why did he come? You know, other reasons. And he said he didn't like the Japanese character, and he didn't really explain what that meant. You know, what was a Japanese character? I don't really know, but so he was very independent, very stubborn. You know, they talk about typical Issei where if he said the tablecloth that was white was black, it was black. Nobody would argue with him, right? So that was how it was. So it was surprising to see his name on the list of Tuna Canyon internees. And I asked my relatives if they knew that. None of them, of course, knew that. And he passed away in '68. So no chance to talk to him more. And then my grandmother passed away in 1980, before the commission hearings in 1981. But I did decide that it was important to testify. And we wanted people to testify because we were actually worried that we wouldn't have enough people. You know, because we told the commission, you have to come to LA because people in LA live here and then they can't go to Washington. They want to testify. And then when we put out the call, people weren't coming. And then, you know, Jim Masaoka said, you know, everybody here has to prepare a testimony because we may have to testify, you know, for our families. And I kind of believe that every story was different, right? So it would be a good thing if people could, if there was an overflow of testimonies from people. So that's when I first called my uncle to find out what my grandfather had lost. I mean, this part I didn't say. He said they had a 20-acre farm. I don't know if they had that much. And they leased it, so they didn't own it, and they lost that, of course, the crops, whatever they had. They had a tractor, they had cars. All that was gone. And their dog, of course, they talk about they loved animals, but their dog they had to give to a neighbor. But so, you know, I did try to get information about that part about my grandfather for the testimony. And it was kind of emotional for me because, so we were taking care of my mom. She had a kind of an autoimmune illness, actually. It must run in our family. But so she passed away in May, and the hearings were in August. So for me, it was quite emotional. So I did feel a stronger reason or motivation to testify, because I knew that, she was gone and her story would never be told, My grandparents were gone, so I thought, it would be important to say.
Hi everyone, I'm back again, and would like to just give a brief bio of Kathy Masaoka. Kathy was born and raised in multicultural Boyle Heights and came of age during the late 60s at the height of the Vietnam War and the dawn of Asian American Studies at UC Berkeley. These experiences shaped her values and direction. Since 1971, she has worked on issues related to youth, workers, housing in Little Tokyo, Los Angeles, and redress for Japanese Americans. Currently co-chair for the Nikkei for Civil Rights and Redress, she served on the editorial team for the book NCRR, The Grassroots Struggle for Japanese American Redress and Reparations, helped to educate the American public about the camps through the film and curriculum, Stand Up for Justice, and was part of the NCRR 9/11 committee, which worked to build relationships with the American Muslim community after 9/11. Kathy was honored to represent NCRR in Japan to support the rights of Koreans and other minorities in 1988, and is currently involved with NCRR, Nikkei Progressives, Vigilant Love, and the Sustainable Little Tokyo Project. She continues to work on reparations for comfort women who were used as sexual slaves during World War II by the Japanese military and through the Nikkei Progressives/NCRR Reparations Committee. She is able to help build solidarity in support of long overdue reparations for African Americans and much needed structural changes. Retired from teaching at an LAUSD continuation high school in 2011, she lives in Los Angeles, Tonglolan, with Mark Masaoka. They have a daughter, Mayumi, son, Dan, and grandsons, Yuma and Leo. So I'd like to invite Kathy Masaoka up to the stage.
Okay, I feel like I already had a program and a show. But on a more serious note, I want to mention Jim Matsuoka, who was I mentioned in the video, and many of you already may know, our fearless leader and founding member of NCRR passed away yesterday. And so it's with a very heavy heart that I stand here, but I have to talk about it because he was really our leader, our mentor, our storyteller, the guy that banged the table at the commission hearings and wouldn't be rushed, and who always advises us. You need people like that. And I don't know what we're going to do because he was that person for us. But so I want to invite everybody today, because I'm talking about an ancestor, my grandfather, Soshi Kadota. I'd like to invite everybody here to also invite their ancestors into the room. They're on the wall, but they're also in everybody's hearts and minds. So as we talk more about what happened in the future, we remember these people. I'd also like to mention 3 people, and there's so many in the San Fernando Valley, because you've always been so welcoming to NCRR here. But there's 3 people that I wanted to mention from San Fernando Valley, and that's Dr. Mary Oda, who testified in 1981, came to every day of remembrance in Little Tokyo after that. I could see her walking slowly with her good friend, the doctor, now I can't remember her name, the other doctor, but Dr. Oda, who taught us so much. Dr. Bo Sakaguchi, who on a lighter note, was just a very kind person and very generous in teaching me how to drive persimmons, which I still do to this day, and I think about him. And finally, Ralph Lazo, who was the subject of our film Stand Up for Justice, and Patty Nagano is here, and Janice Yen is here, and other people that helped to work on the film. Maybe there's others I've missed, but he was such an inspiration of someone that spoke up against injustice and spoke up for his friends in solidarity. So just wanted to mention them and think about them as we talk today. So what I really am talking about today is gratitude and the importance of continuing to learn, to relearn our history, and to unlearn some things maybe, and to not always think that we know what we believe to be true is true. So so first let me thank June Burke, who may not be here, and Evan Kodani, who made the video that you just saw, and Nancy Kyoko Oda, Kanji Sahara, and Dr. Russell Endo, and all the people that have brought the light to the Tuna Canyon Detention Station Center. Center's history is a long name. And if not for them, I would not have known that my grandfather was at Tuna Canyon. I just happened to be at a luncheon and said, oh, let me look at the names. And I see my grandfather there, along with some other names I recognize from the Santa Maria Valley. No one in my family knew, as I said in the video. They just thought he was picked up and taken to Bismarck, North Dakota, and that was that. And so that's all I knew, and I never questioned anything more. What I do know about my grandfather is that he came to the US and worked for 10 years as a laborer in California, mainly in the Santa Maria area at the Utsunomiyas and Union Sugar, if you were from that area, before returning to the Ehime-ken in Japan to marry my grandmother, Toshi. And they had their first son, my uncle Yuzo, in Japan. And for whatever reason, again, I don't know why, he decided the family would return to Santa Maria. To my knowledge, he never went back to Japan again. And as I mentioned in the video, he didn't like the Japanese character. That was never explained, but I like to think that it had something to do with the class structure that he didn't like, the rigidness of society in Japan, and maybe the growing military ambitions that he saw brewing. And so I like to think that maybe he had some of those sentiments, but I'll never know. I first met my grandparents when they returned to Santa Maria to the Nipomo area from Chicago in 1962. I was a teenager, and a sensei who did not speak Japanese, surprise, and did not know enough or care enough to ask any questions. Very sad, right? A lot of what I did hear from my family was not really correct. I was told that they leased the land, which made sense since the Issei could not own property, as many of you know. There were so many laws against them. They could not become citizens, they could not vote, they could not marry non-Japanese. All the cards were stacked against them, but they stayed. But the government files show that they actually had 10 acres that were in my mother's name. So they did own land. And she was a first citizen child, and a bank account was in her name as well. So I really appreciate what I learned from Dr. Russell Endo about the Japanese living in the Santa Barbara County, which was where Santa Maria is, which includes Santa Maria, Guadalupe, Lompoc, and Santa Barbara. Is anybody here from that area? Oh, okay, Robert. I don't know if anybody else is, but I learned that, it gave me his report and presentation just gave me a better understanding of what the communities looked like before the war. There were thriving Japantowns. I mean, I've heard that a million times. Hundreds of Japantowns throughout California. It didn't mean much to me. And that's what I mean by relearning or, unlearning. It's sort of like, well, let's think about that. What were those Japantowns like? These Japantowns had dentists, fish markets, churches, noodle shops, manju shops, restaurants and garages. And there were close to 2,200 Japanese living in Santa Barbara County at that time, pre-war. I just saw Santa Maria as this little hick town. My cousin drove us around their main street. It was like one block, and open fields. Not a big deal that we went to see our grandparents there. But when Dr. Endo talks about close to 265 Issei being rounded up in early morning raids in about 2 or 3 days, that to me is shocking when I really think about it. how quickly they moved in and rounded up 265 people, mostly Issei men. I can only imagine the chilling effect and terror that the people felt in the communities. They lost over 10% of the community in the short 2 or 3 days. Every family must have been impacted by this, and they say that this was the second largest raid on the West Coast. On top of that, the raids took place on February 18 and 19. And as you saw in Kyoko's presentation, EO 9066, as we all know, was issued on February 19th, 1942. So they get the news of EO 9066, their fathers are picked up, their community is totally at a loss, and they're left to deal with it, this double shock. And then I began to wonder why. Why were they so targeted? I began to realize how strong the racism was towards Japanese in that area, and that the farms were very lucrative, very thriving, and the land was very important and precious and valuable. And so they didn't want the Japanese there. My family didn't know why my grandfather was taken. They always said, oh, he wasn't very important, like in the video. They always kind of put him down a little bit. And they thought that he might have been the principal of a language school. But I found out from the records that he was actually just a member of the Japanese Association. And it didn't take much. As some of the information on the walls here say, you just had to be suspect. So you're a member of the association, and he claims he never attended any meetings. He might have been telling the truth, I don't know, but this is his testimony to the hearing. He never attended meetings, and he didn't know any of the officers. Okay. He was a pretty sharp man, so he might have made that up, I don't know. But just being a member of any of these groups was reason enough for the government to pick you up. So I really appreciate the information that I got from the Tuna Canyon people and from Dr. Russell Endo. And I want to say that it's important for us to question some of the information we get from our families. Look at the documents that you have from the government, and I looked at it a million times, I just didn't pay attention, and to what are behind some of those dates, and to see if there's more research to be done. I have a greater appreciation of what happened to people, and understanding of what happened to the people in the area, and what they must have felt like. And I just saw a film called Hitohata yesterday, which really talks about the Issei and what they faced and how they suffered. And we all know that. I've heard it many times again, but you just don't quite grasp, at least for me. I'm finally grasping this, I think. Maybe as Nisei and other folks, you know what your parents went through. As a third generation, we don't always understand that. So I want to say that information and learning has been really important to me, becoming an activist. And I saw descendant, activist, and teacher under the title. Descendant with a small d, because I feel like I just learned about it and I know so little. But I am an activist and a teacher, and I am proud of that. And I think that always trying to find out more about my history and who I am was what was a driving force, in terms of the late 60s, really wanting to know who I was as a Japanese American, and finding community and becoming active in Little Tokyo, and seeing that we had a lot of problems. I might be causing some disagreement here and I think that it's good. Okay, so one of the things I want to say is that we as Japanese Americans don't always like to disagree with each other. We kind of like to let things slide, but it's okay to disagree. So I'm gonna disagree with some things that I may have heard here today, which is that yes, we did pull ourselves up. Yes, we did work hard. Yes, we did succeed. We went to colleges, the third generation, but it wasn't enough. And many people can't do that. And that's not going to solve our problems by simply working hard, because at any moment it could be taken away. And we know that. Issei worked hard, it was taken away. And Muslims work hard and it's taken away. And immigrants work hard and things are taken away. So I want to say that we can't always look at things like if you work hard enough, things are going to be okay. They are not. Because what I think I've learned, and before I go there, let me say that I also learned a lot from the Nisei when they testified in the commission hearings about their experiences and I was so proud that they were willing to speak about their pain, because so many people, and including my own family, would not speak about the pain. They'd always say, we have to be stoic. We have to bear up. We can't talk about it. Don't cry, And it was like, we have to go there. That's the other thing we have to do. We have to go to the pain. And not to wallow in it, but we have to understand our pain if we're going to understand other people's pain. So I'm here to say to everybody, it's okay to go to the pain, and it's okay to cry, and it's okay to look at it, and it's not pretty, but it's something that, and we're not doing it for self-pity at all either. I think we're doing it to educate ourselves, partly to heal, but partly that we can build solidarity with others. And so I think in the last 2 or 3 years, especially 2020, after the killing of George Floyd, and I think many eyes opening about where are we at in this country, and many of us believe that we wanted to see a better way, and I'm going to have to take a drink of water. As an idealistic Sanse in the 60s, we wanted to see a new way. We wanted to see, idealistically, food, clothing, shelter, education, medical care for all. And we thought that was something could happen. And then gradually over time, we thought, well, maybe it's something we hope for and we work for, but it may not happen. But I think since 2020, my eyes have reopened, and I think I'm relearning and listening to younger people who say, we can imagine a different future, and that we have to be part of imagining that future and thinking that it's possible, and to make those steps now. And so it's like creating the world that we want to be, even though what we see isn't good, because it can't go on this way. We can't go on with people living in the streets, and it's not okay. And I realized that I didn't always see them as human beings myself, and I had to be honest with myself. And that's the part about unlearning and being honest about the fact that I accepted the fact that we have people that live on the streets, and that meant that it was okay, but it's not okay. So I'm here, and I'm probably saying things that maybe anger people. I don't know. I'm not sure, but I really hope that we can open all of our minds, and I'm still struggling to open my mind to ideas I had that were maybe incorrect, but it's constantly learning. And I think that that's what we're trying to do. Constantly learn from our past, learn from the present, listen to each other, argue with each other, and maybe we'll come up with some answers. So, and I do really still believe in solidarity, and I think that it's very important to do that. I don't think that the camps were a mistake. I think that it was very conscious, because we have a structure of government that was built on racism, and it's something that is really endemic and in every part of our government, as we're seeing today in City Council. It just comes out.
We're open to taking some questions. We hope we have some answers, but I want to tell you, Kathy just got started. She's got, come on, Kathy, let's get down.
Get down, Kyoko.
Because she's really involved in the HR 40, which I think is very important. It's the current legislation that we'd like to see to look at reparations for the African American community. And so she didn't bring that up because she's afraid that you might feel in a way that you didn't come to hear that. But I think what I wanted to do by bringing Kathy here is not only look at the past, but to think about the future. And she said it so eloquently about what this world could be, very, very beautifully. So do you have a few questions before we break for our snack? You've been such a great audience. Give yourselves a big hand. We had a few glitches. Thank you so much.
Nancy, I was remiss. I got carried away with some of their train of thought, but I should say that just to let you know that I don't think we should be afraid of reparations. I think maybe sometimes people feel like we're going to be losing something, or there's going to be some a terrible response. But what I've been finding in working with some of the legacy organizations in the African American community, it's really based on a lot of the principles of just wanting to repair, and they're reaching out to other communities, including us. They appreciate the support that Japanese Americans have given to them. Partly because we understand what happened, and we also know that reparations is possible, even though we didn't fully get all the reparations that we could have, that we're learning today. They're talking about not only compensation, but repair, and about, rebuilding, community, and what I think is most important, a guarantee that it won't happen again. And so that's what we're talking about, a guarantee that none of this will happen again, that people won't continue to be, losing their land or being pushed off or being, even the prisons. This may be controversial, but when I really look at the prisons, how can it be that so many African American and brown people are in the prisons, and that slave labor is still, the 13th Amendment says, we got rid of slavery, and this surprised me, except as punishment for a crime. So we didn't get rid of slavery. So that's something to look at for all of us. But so we have a committee, the NPNCRR Reparations Committee, and we're supporting a California Reparations Commission, the California Reparations Task Force, which gave a wonderful report recently, 500 pages long. If you want to read it, there's a short part and a long part, but it summarizes the harms that have been faced by people, African American people. And I think that most people just want justice. It's not about retribution, it's about justice.
I have a question. So you said it's not about retribution, it's about justice. But what I think is justice? I'm familiar with the movement, and I think that's a big question for us as Japanese Americans. We questioned reparations for us and what that meant to us, and so I think making that connection and finding that connection is important. But what does that mean to us as Japanese Americans to be in solidarity with the African American community, and what does justice mean in that sense?
Well, we're talking about camps never happening again, but they can happen again if there's any kind of justice, any reason. And there's not a lot of, they picked up people simply being suspect. And that decision could be made again. Camps are still on the books. It's not like it's overturned. So, if there's any reason why they want to put somebody into camps, they can. And they always talk about it. This is how naive I was. I thought after we won redress, there would never be camps. I thought we did it. They can never try to put people in camps again. And then they were talking about it periodically when the Gulf War happened, and then Muslim Americans and different people. They talk about reestablishing the camps, and I thought, why are they talking about that again? How could they do that? Didn't we resolve that? And then I realized that gosh, how naive I am. Of course they can do this. They have the power to do this. It has nothing to do with what we did. We haven't guaranteed that it won't happen again. And I think that's part of the connection. Our responsibility is really to do that. That the camps won't happen again, that other injustices won't happen again. Because that's just an example of an action that's taking place because of the structure that we live in. The people that are in power can make the decisions, based on what they see.
Thank you, Ariel. We have another question.
Hi, thank you, Kathy. You're so inspiring. I have a question. Like you, my family, didn't know what happened to my mother's father. She didn't know until a few years ago at another Tuna Canyon exhibit in Cerritos. She found her father's name on the list of detainees. So is there any way that we can find out any more information? Like, did they take interviews of the detainees at all? Are there any records like that exist?
Okay. Briefly, you heard Kathy talk about one of the hearings maybe her grandfather was part of. So there's a National Archives, which the Department of Justice has preserved the records. So if you want to go research, you can find out. But Dr. Russell Endo, whose grandfather's pictured here, Higoto Endo, he called it a kangaroo court. You know, they went to LA City Hall, they had an interview, but it was predestined that they would be considered innocent, although no one has ever been charged of being guilty. So I don't know if that answers your question, to go to the National Archives, and I can help you with that.
Okay, good.
Oh, go ahead, Linda.
Well, I had a question about reparations for African Americans. Would you consider the indigenous Americans, the Chicanos or Latinos who've all been kind of persecuted or had their lands and property taken away?
You know, the African American reparations, they understand that has to be part of the picture, because those two groups, especially the indigenous people whose lands we're on, and the African Americans who came here, who did the work and built the wealth, those are the two groups that kind of interfaced, and really the whole country was based on in terms of the growth. So yes, they do mention that. I think more has to be discussed, and just following some of the things that are out there in terms of the indigenous folks, they are building their own movement. They just it's just they're not as visible, which is the thing that they always say, is that we want to be visible. Just see us, we exist. And they have some land things that they're getting. They're building some land areas, but I just feel that they have a different perspective on land. It's not about I own the land a lot, and I don't want to speak for indigenous people because I'm not indigenous. But from what I hear, and I really respect the way that they look at it, they're very tied to it because of their cultural and spiritual beliefs, and I think that's just something we have to try to understand ourselves, and to learn more.
Oh, we have one more question. Larry?
Yeah, excuse me, I just found out that some attorneys went to Griffith Park.
Yes.
Now, do you know exactly where it is? Or the location of, because I remember 50 years ago going to Griffith Park. When you enter from Las Feliz, you go past the horses and the train ride, and there were some green barracks there. Is that where they were located?
We're still working on that. We're getting closer and closer as time goes on. We've been asked that question quite a bit, so we're doing research. So I'm not going to say specifically where it is, but it's very close to Travel Town.
Oh, then I know where it is then.
Okay.
And let me add that my grandfather was actually at the Griffith Park substation too, and we lived near Griffith Park, and I never knew that.
Oh, and interesting, because when I last remember seeing it, they were these barracks for housing chickens and animals. So
Actually, our coalition is working with the Griffith Park Foundation to put up a plaque there, which might be easier than getting the one at Tuna Canyon. So that's on the docket right now in terms of work. So we can't tell you what day it's going to get done, but the Historical Society is very interested in pursuing this. So we'll keep you apprised. But it's almost time for us to conclude. Do we have a final question? Is that Patty?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I was wondering if in the HR 40 or if there's been any discussion about commission hearings. I think one of the biggest advantages of having the hearings was to find out a lot about the history, and also maybe in the course of the commission hearings there was the development of what kinds of reparations would be suitable, since not personal to individuals, but rather donations to 501(c) organizations structured to provide for the entire community. Is there anything like that?
I'm glad you asked that question, but I'll answer it in terms of the California Task Force, because they've already been meeting for a year, and they gave out the report on the harms that were done in this 500-page report. And then this year they're going to be talking about what are some of the remedies. And in terms of the commission hearing idea, me at Iwataki, one of our members, spoke on a panel this last September with Mitch Maki and Ron Wakabayashi, and talked about why we support, and and about the commission hearings and how powerful it was. So they have had these things called listening sessions where people have gone around to different communities and people have spoken. But I don't know if they fully have understood how important the commission hearings are or were for us and could be for their community. So we're hoping to really get that more in there. And I think there is a group that's trying to do that on their own, a grassroots group. But the task force really needs to understand that, I think. And Don Tamaki, who's on the task force, the only Japanese American, the only non-black on the task force, has been trying to express that to the commission folks. So, I hope I answered your questions on that level. Yeah, that is such a key part for all of us to learn through that.
Okay, what we're going to do right now is Ariel is going to wrap this up, but I'd like to kind of say that we're going to invite the Nisei who are here today to go to the special tables in the back. You'll be served. You do not have to get in the lunch line ever again. Okay, and we want to thank especially Nancy Takayama for going through all of that extra work, and also to Daryl Kunitomi for pitching in, and I hope everyone had a good afternoon. And so Ariel, please.
Sure thing. I would like to first thank both of you two for being amazing leaders in our community and educating my generation and me about our history, and also how we can be active members of not only our Japanese American community, but also how to just be active members of our society and of our country, because that's also very important. Because not only are we Japanese American, we're Japanese, but we are Japanese Americans. And that's something that I hold very true to myself, and that I know a lot of people within my generation also are very proud of and recognize the importance of. Thank you. We'd also like to thank the RESA Foundation, Manzanar Committee, again our SFE-JACC, TCDSC Board of Directors, Mark's, sorry if I butcher this name, Sturdivant, thank you, Scholarship for Justice, and a special thanks to the people that set up today, Janet and Jason Fuji, Jenny Chomori, Terry McClure, Charlene and Glenn Miyagishima, John, Monique, Devin, and Kyle Oda, Liz Doomy, and Joy Longworth. Our lunch today is from Maxwell's Chicken and Rice, located in Northridge. Thank you so much for providing our lunch today. They are located on 9346 Corbin Avenue, Northridge. If you guys love the lunch, that's where to go. So that's going to be our program for the day. So everyone who's staying for lunch, Niseis, please go to the back tables so that you can get your lunch and you don't have to wait in a line because you guys are special.
I'd like to also thank Kate Inoue and her family for coming today and helping us with service. Thank you so much.
And for everyone else, thank you for attending today. It was a beautiful program, so educational. We will be lining up for lunch in the lobby in front of our, I always forget what it's called, but the donation tree. I just call it the tree. But in front of the donation tree. And then we'll be making a line and going into our community room to grab your lunch, some water, and some cookies, because everyone needs dessert. So thank you all so much for attending.
Thank you.